Nights rise where silent circuits creep. With hearts of fire we guard the flame to hold the line. Keep free our name. Chains, our truth will soar. The round table stands forevermore.
Hello and welcome back. We are doing another roundtable, anti-technocracy, and of course I've got joining me are the great knights. So we've got the OG Patrick Wood, we've got Aaron Day, and we will have joining us Craig Wenclewicz. And we're going to talk about the two topics that we're going to cover. We will leave time for a Q&A, so you can ask all sorts of questions. But we're going to cover robotics, and we'll probably start with robotics because the second topic is on the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And I think Craig will have a lot to add to that, but he's having some technical difficulties. So at the moment, he is a blue screen rather than a shining knight. But he will be joining us very soon. So how is everyone doing today?
Very well.
Very good. Very good.
Awesome. So I think that opening video was probably a great intro to talk about robotics. So I know there's a lot of discussion about the fourth industrial revolution. The quote unquote experts, we call them so-called expert. I put them in air quotes because we don't trust experts so much anymore. But they say that we're actually already in the fifth industrial revolution. And of course, the fourth is where they're doing all the data collection so that they can create the whole internet of everything, essentially. The internet of things, the internet of wearables that, of course, RFK has been talking about. We now need to have, because it's not MAHA, it's MABA, which means Make America Biotech Accelerate. So that's the fourth industrial revolution. But then the fifth industrial revolution, they claim, is human-centric. So, of course, what that means is that we're going to have the introduction of robotics and what they call cobots. So they're creating an infrastructure where we will be collaborating with the robots. So there's a lot of, teamwork is what they call it with robots. And of course, we have people like Elon Musk who are telling us that they're going to replace us in all these jobs. And he says this is a great thing because now we can roll out the UBI, but he says it's not going to be a universal basic income. It's going to be a universal higher income. Of course, we're all going to live a life of luxury, and we're going to have to figure out how we find meaning in our lives because we're just going to sit around twiddling our thumbs while all the robots do everything for us. Of course, I don't necessarily think that's really what's going to happen. I think it's going to be something more like a conditionally based income. But that's not to say that it's all negative and doom and gloom. I think there's lots of incredible things that technology can do for us. I personally think that having an Optimus might not be such a bad thing. I think it looks like he might be quite helpful. But there are definitely some real considerations for what it's going to mean for humans, for job opportunities, and of course for, the technocrats who want to control all of us. So yeah, I will turn it over to my shining knights. Who wants to chime in? What are your thoughts on where we are with robots and what the implications are going to be?
Isn't it interesting that Elon Musk at this point, he could wipe out all production lines of Tesla automobiles and replace it with Optimus robots. He says that this is going to be the first $1 trillion industry in the history of the world. And he's planning on making a lot of robots. And what people don't see at this point for sure is this year they're in the beta phase of testing these robots. And probably in the first quarter of next year, 2026, we'll see the production lines gearing up, and not only for Tesla, but also for the other manufacturers who are racing to get their stake in the whole space in the first place. They know that Tesla is probably going to beat them to the punch but if they can get a foothold in the first place, they can be major players for that $1 trillion industry they say it's going to emerge out of nowhere.
Yeah, and they're also talking about now they have these robots that will be like they had ecto-life pods, right? They would be wombed, and now they're talking about doing robots that will do that. So they're literally creating life. They have robots that can create robots, right? They're creating assembly line, but then they're also talking about robots that will be like a womb essentially. And it's actually, I've looked into it a little bit. It's actually cheaper than IVF. It's just kind of,
Yeah.
Well,
This-
sorry, go ahead.
No, you do.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in this area, the U.S. is behind. Not that the U.S.-China thing is actually even a real contest, but China is actually significantly ahead in the robotics area. And I've noticed on my feed this week, Unitree seems to be one of the dominant players over there. And I saw a clip today of some guy who had a couple of Unitree robots washing his car outside, but they already have a pretty robust market. You can buy robots from Unitree now that are at an entry-level point. And so I saw some forecast that Goldman Sachs is projecting 250,000 humanoid robots by 2030, I think that it is. And so this is coming very quickly. But there are factories in China that are completely 100% run by robots. So to me, I've become more interested in studying what's going on in China because we tend to have this feeling that we're ahead of the curve here. And it turns out we're not in a lot of these areas. I think it's something like 47 out of 54 areas of technological development. China is actually more advanced.
yeah.
So I encourage people to just go to YouTube or whatever and Google China robots, China robotic manufacturing, just whatever, play around with a bunch of different combinations. And I think you'll be surprised at how far along it is. And again, the question is from a technocracy perspective, this could be a good thing. I mean, I have a robot vacuum. I don't know if you guys have one of those. I bought an early one, which was absolutely horrible. I mean, it was an early robot that had a mop, and I mean, it was a disaster. But
Not the Roomba?
It wasn't a Roomba. It was actually kind of even probably a Chinese knockoff or something on Amazon. But I got, and so everybody used to laugh at me. But I got a new one recently, and it actually works really well. It cleans itself, it empties the vacuum and everything. And so there are some good applications, but I doubt that's the direction they're heading.
I don't think it's all bad. I think there's definitely some real potential. I mean, we obviously used AI to make that opening video, right? There's some really incredible things that we can do. But I did a show on this, and yeah, I looked into the other areas that were using robotics already, and China is really far ahead. Taiwan is pretty far ahead. And I know we had talked about maybe for the next month talking about AI medicine, but they have, I believe in both Taiwan, China, and a couple of other countries, they already have AI hospitals where robots are, running most of it. They have AI cities, not just in China, but I believe Estonia is really far ahead in this. Some places you wouldn't expect, but yeah, we're really, so when they keep framing it like Trump's whole AI action plan, talking about how we have to compete with China, I agree. I think a lot of that's set up to look like a Cold War with China. There's a AI arms race, but the reality is they are much further ahead of us than in this regard for sure. So
I think the price point for Unitree is like $12,000, perhaps. I
cheaper
think does
than
that
Optimus, much
well.
cheaper than Optimus.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. I think Optimus is probably going to come in about 20,000
I
for a
think
unit.
30, but you might be right. I'll
Okay.
look
Well,
it up.
yeah, but whatever. I think Unitree really has the market share at this point, and certainly they're going to charge for different levels of AI, like Tesla does in the first place for their cars. So you want a super smart one, that's an extra fee for a month, I'm sure. But nevertheless, getting anything for 12,000 bucks at this point, that's a steal, right? Well, that's what a steal, right?
All relative. I did look it up. So it says that the Tesla Optimus starts at 20 to 30. So
Mhm.
between, I guess, depending on what level you want. But
Yeah.
they also are offering plans for a rental program for $100 to $500 initially. I don't know if that's a day, a month, or what it is, but yeah,
Mhm.
there'll be rental plans because, of course, we shouldn't own anything. We'll own nothing and be happy. Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't know about the rental program.
My guess is that this market will be robust from the get-go, just like ChatGPT was first released to how many 200 million users within the first few months, and that won't be 200 million of these produced in that time frame, but you can see the acceptance. I think is going to be wildly successful. And this is alarming on one hand because that will normalize the whole market space, making it possible to roll out the robots into real jobs, and it'll be a devastating blow, I think. On the other hand, some people are really saying there's no way these robots are going to compete with, for instance, the Teamsters union. Just wait, just wait. I'm counting on the Teamsters at this point to put to scuttle this whole thing. They could do it with
Leave
spanners.
it to the film industry. Yeah, they're going to save the day. Well, there's all sorts of different types. So of course, like there's the cobots that I was talking about, right? They're supposed to be working with the humans, and then they have the very humanoid robots. And I was looking into a company, it's called Robotics. That's what it's called, and they do like the very human type of skin mask, so it looks like a person. And they're saying that they're not trying to compete with Optimus, that their whole agenda is to compete in the like hospitality industry, and that they're training these robots to have, obviously they can't have real empathy, but to have to mimic empathy. And this, I don't know, kind of freaks me out a little bit because they're talking about it's one thing for it to be in the hospitality industry like a hostess or the front desk of a hotel, but what happens when they start becoming your therapist? I think this might have some real ethical and future humanity concerns. But then, of course, the other one that is very concerning to me is the digital twin aspect, right? This is and this is a huge infrastructure they're setting up to merge into the fifth industrial revolution. Is really all about the digital twin. And I keep hearing like a lot of my concern is always when they start renaming things. I always get worried, like when they have a lot of names for things, and the code for digital twin does seem to be like agent. They always talk about, and the agent, like this is human centered is another one, but it's not the human. It's that they're doing a representation of you in the digital space. But when they come up with a robot that's like a representative of you, that's I don't know. Like, does the robot get a speeding ticket and you're exonerated? I don't know how this works.
Yeah.
I wonder if if it's, well, I can see the possibility. What if the robot, your personal robot, let's say you buy an Optimist and it's super smart, whatever, would it be possible to have your virtual twin right beside you at that point, collecting all the information, including your biometrics and your psychological information, all your conversations, etc.
Yeah.
It seems to me that it would be a natural to create your digital twin beside you and then pipe that into the internet, whatever, to store it somewhere else.
I think that's what they're planning to do. I had something, I'll see if I can find it to pull it up, but it was where they were talking about, I don't know where I have it, but it's using the digital twin and how that would be exactly what you're saying, collecting your biometric data, and then they would treat you based on the metrics of the digital twin, which I would imagine could have all sorts of complication. I don't know.
You would think if my digital twin was right there beside me and I had a heart attack, theoretically, it would feel my heart attack real time. No pain over there, right? But nevertheless, it would sense the heart attack and take action based on it.
Right. Yeah. And I know that they've already had, not with the digital twin, but with the wearables, they've already had issues with this. So like for instance, the Apple Watch might detect that somebody has fallen or they've had a heart attack or their blood oxygen level dropped or something, and the ambulances come and they were totally fine. Yeah, so that they've already had errors in that regard, and that's not even the digital twin. Yeah, so let me see if I can find what it is. This was in this was in the Internet of Medical Things, where they were using these. They already did these experiments back in 2020. So, yeah.
Well, and what does it do from a legal perspective? So let's say that you have, an umbrella policy for insurance, and you have this digital twin and it makes a mistake of some type, right? Someone else has a heart attack and it starts CPR, or makes a call or does something like that. What happens then? Are you then legally responsible? Who's legally responsible? Does it fall back on the manufacturer? Is there some sort of and then, what if it goes rogue and goes running down the street and does something? I mean, these are all questions we have to ask, right? Does it follow? Do we have to have umbrella policies to cover this, cover the actions of our robot?
Yeah, that's what I said. Does the robot get the speeding ticket, or how does that work?
It's interesting. Now, all of the insurance companies are basically run by AI at this point. When I talk about how they rate the insurance program that you buy into in the first place, and then they rate your claims against that policy. And so it's all from top to bottom is being run by AI. So you're right. If a robot goes rogue or just does something it shouldn't do, it'll be judged and rated by AI in the first place. Who do you think is going to come out on the short end of that? The human or the AI? You know it's going to be the humans at that point. If AI is making all the determinations of what's real or what not, what you can make a claim for, or what there's an exception in clause 42B that we have to deny your claim. Sorry. That's,
Well, and do we get the optionality? Or you know how you get a device and you're allowed to set it up for your own personal use? I mean, are these like selection buttons you can go through and say, I don't want it to perform CPR on me? Or, you know, I would assume you'd get some flexibility, right? I mean, at least for a little while.
Well, actually, yeah, I was talking to somebody about that recently, how I think in the beginning they're probably going to have like a turn, like an opt-in function where you can pick they can't just spy on you, right? Like I mean, they probably will, just like your phones, but they'll at least give you the illusion that you have some sort of agency, and then it'll shift to, like where they're completely in control. But my big concern, I'm just looking through this with the robots, but my big concern is right now we're already seeing like the chat GPT psychosis, right? Like people are, as a result of confiding in their whatever AI chatbot that they're using. But what happens when the robot becomes their best friend and they're sharing everything, and then that robot collects all the data and could report back? I mean, you have this problem already with the bots, but they could report. And let's say now they're trying to, I know Trump was talking about recreating they called them the insane asylums back in the day, but I don't know what they're calling them now, but to recreate the institutions. And what happens if people are involuntarily reported? And now we have people, yeah. I'm very concerned about that, because that's like one flew over the cuckoo's nest, right?
Well, I mean,
But
that's
now,
a risk, and that's a risk now. I mean, even OpenAI and X has come out and said, look, whatever you put in here can be used against you. And in some cases, some of these AI models are actually preemptively reporting your behavior to various agencies. And so, I mean, that is a risk. Of course, the bigger issue is the problem isn't the AI; it's the fact that we actually have laws in government that would allow for that kind of thing to begin with. I mean, so we have a joint problem. We have the problem of now all of this new surveillance, but then we also have a situation where we have a structure of government where people are starting to talk about things like pre-crime and how to use this kind of information and analyze this information and then weaponize that against specific groups of people.
Well, and does this cross over too, Aaron, with what you've been working on with the click wrap agreements? Is there some kind of a legal thing in the same situation where, you're forced to take a download, for your robot, again, because, we're going to start off with something that's probably 10% of right? Nothing's ever perfect, but it goes to a point where, like in math, it goes to a point where it gets slowly, increasingly better. So now we have to assume that these things are at the beginning of their effectiveness curve. They'll get better. So you're going to have nonstop downloads out of the gate. They're going to be learning, sharing information. And then as we go through that, then it comes down to, you're going to accept these things, and how much of your freedoms are we going to throw away with these things too? We're doing it as human beings now, but once we start giving our robots this autonomy, like Patrick was saying, it's reading your heartbeat. I mean, you can only begin to imagine all the different things. How much is that going to transfer over, do you think, Aaron, in terms of the click wrap and giving away some of our freedoms?
Well, I can guarantee you out of the gate, the contracts are going to be extremely long, and we're going to give up all of our rights. Right. I mean, they're basically going to shield themselves from any liability, and they're going to be, 100-page contracts. I think we can assume that. Actually, somebody just sent me a video clip yesterday of somebody who had the the GM OnStar system. Mm-hmm. And they decided to put in a request to see what kind of data was collected, and were horrified at the amount of information that OnStar was already collecting and how they were using the information, to the point where it would actually say, every day at 5:30, the driver has a near impact with a small object, right? And so this is going against some kind of like evaluation of the quality of the driving. Well, what happens? The guy leaves work at 5 o'clock, hits his driveway at 5:30, and his cats come out to greet him, because that's feeding time, and that's when he comes home. And so he was like, I can't believe this is in the file. And so I was watching this, and so then they're now going through the online agreement for OnStar. So this is going to be another one of these things where what we're going to find is while we're sitting here today worried about what it's going to be like as robots are added and everything else, we're going to find that they've already been doing tracking through existing services, and it's already been used in ways that we have no idea.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think so. I think that's a real concern. As you said, they're already able to do that. You already sign away that they can use what information against you. But I think once these robots become more human-like, I think that's going to be even more of a concern. Because if people are, it's already like the movie Her, where people are talking to some like bot that's really just a typing function. But what happens when it looks really human and people are confiding in it, thinking this is a companion? I mean, they already have the sex robots, right? This is I think there's I just think that the whatever the problems are now are going to magnify.
Well, and initially, when they start off with anything like this, right, it's kind of a loss leader. So they get these robots out there for 20 or 30,000. But then you also have to wonder, too, if this creates the haves and have-nots as well. Because if you can afford the $80,000 robot, it's going to do so much more for you than someone who can only afford the $8,000 robots, right? So it's the haves and have-nots again. It creates that, the disparity. So that's another thing to think about, is right out of the gate, they're probably all pretty similar, but there will be a differentiation between the two. And, the key will be how, you're embarrassed by your robot. Your robot's he's got one of those junky robots. One of those kind of things. Can't keep up with the Joneses.
we can presume that that these robots will communicate with 5G probably or maybe
6G.
from your router, but with the advent of 6G. All of a sudden, this will add new capabilities that were not possible before. For instance, if you have a family of robots, say you have five people in your family, and everybody has their own personal robot. 6G could possibly create an ad hoc network between you guys, all the people in the family, where all the information and knowledge is shared between all the computers. This kind of approaches your concept of the noosphere, where you have this combined knowledge of groups of people in any case, and that's another level that we have to consider.
Well, and we're seeing that with the, the new aircraft, right? It's going to have potentially, 40, 50, 100 drones flying around it. It's kind of the same thing, right? It's in communication with who knows what, in time. It's kind of what you're talking about, right? Creating a little network amongst themselves.
Yes, this will be a specific feature of 6G. At least that's what they're pumping at this point. That it'll be able to create ad hoc networks on the fly to connect things together that probably shouldn't be connected, but they will be.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and 6G will also have the capacity to connect with you can connect wearables with 5G,
Mm-hmm.
but they can use like sensor technology with 6G that they don't actually even need to put them on you. They can operate through you. 6G, I know it sounds crazy, science fiction, like this is like what a Black Mirror episode, talks about. But the research is there. They are working on it, if not already have it, where it's operating literally through you. So yeah, when you talk about this kind of a noospheric, yeah.
There's another technology that's based on communication as well. Bluetooth, of course. Everybody understands Bluetooth to an extent, but Bluetooth low energy. This is a new standard that's come on recently. It's going to get better as time goes on. It's based on very marginal power required to power devices. Things, for instance, insertables, consumables. You take a pill down your gullet, and all of a sudden it shows up on the radar based on this low energy Bluetooth. So you have on one hand this low energy system that can be operated for all the local devices, then you have normal Wi-Fi then for 6G, for instance, and it can communicate to anybody in the world.
Yeah, I just asked like a really quick search and it made like AI made a graph for me. So they talk about for the 6G impact is healthcare, remote surgery, elderly care robots, enables precise teleoperation with less than 1 ms latency and ethical, of course, ethical ontologies for safe interaction, disaster recovery, casualty detection, infrastructure assessment, supports R2R cooperation, I guess robot to robot cooperation in damaged environments via NTNs and ISAC for mapping. I don't know what those are. I'd have to look them up. Manufacturing logistics, collaborative robots, autonomous delivery fleets, enhances efficiency with AI-driven motion planning and high-density connectivity. Smart cities and agriculture, utility inspection, precision farming, optimizes processes with massive Internet of Things and energy efficient sensing. That's the sensing that I was talking about. Public safety, UAV supervision, intruder detection, and it improves situational awareness with real-time BNT and ISAC. I'd have to look up the ISAC. Yeah, so that's
And we have to think the thought has crossed Elon Musk's mind to connect all Optimus to Starlink, right? I have to feel it. I have to believe that that's probably crossed his mind at some point.
Yep.
for sure.
Ay, ay,
I can't imagine that he's not planning on doing that. I would
Yeah.
think so.
When I was looking at Optimus and you look at their balance sheet, I can't find how much is being allocated toward that, So of course we know, Tesla and the background on that. And then we know, some of the other projects that are going into this, but Optimus, I couldn't really find a lot of numbers as to how much is going into this. So I don't know if it's being masked or if I just didn't get the results. I'm not sure. Did you guys get any results as to how much because we know that he said, 80% of Tesla is ultimately going to be Optimus based, in terms of revenues and so forth, and the actual component of Tesla. I think that's the way it's been phrased. I couldn't find any numbers that said that. How much are they putting into, what percent is going into Optimus every year in terms of development?
I didn't find the number, but I remember hearing him do a speech where he said that he thinks that the revenue he thinks that like Optimus will completely replace like triple the revenue of Tesla.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was triple, yeah.
We know
Yeah,
that it's at least 10 billion going into autonomous cars minimum. That's a bare minimum. So you have to think that it's probably at least that much going into Optimus, correct? I would think it's at least that much, or it will be pretty soon.
He's already declared that he's basically is running a robotic company already with Tesla cars. The only thing different is the wheels, and that's about it.
That's what he said.
The wheels they go where you want them to go, but he said before that basically he's already running a robotic company with Tesla. And the purpose of him saying that was to demonstrate he's far ahead on the curve to develop humanoid robots.
Yeah, I'm not finding any public information on how much has been invested, but yeah. He's definitely saying that. I agree with you.
And he projects that Optimus could be a $10 trillion long-term market itself just from that.
It's
Exactly.
just
Crazy.
Well, then that can't help us but think about Oracle, the recent moves that have taken place in Oracle, obviously the database, the access to TikTok, and then OpenAI and Sam Altman. I think they just said they're amping up some of their I couldn't quite sort out, but today I was talking about it on my show where they've amped up to 850 billion, some project that was, I think it was like 100. So again, it's this acceleration of money going into this in this race. And today there was also news out that a bunch of CEOs got together, and I think one of them was DataSign was kind of leading it, and they were saying that this isn't moving fast enough, and they were actually going to work on a marketing and ad campaign to move things even faster. So I don't know. And the other thing that was an interesting fact was over the next 5 years, I think it is, they're planning to put now 4 trillion into above and beyond where we're at. 4 trillion from here forward over the next 5 years, 4 trillion into the AI space, which also is going to just deliver the information that goes to all this stuff, right, that we're talking about. So it's the backbone, the knowledge base of all that. So it's exciting, exciting stuff.
Exciting and depending on what they do with it, potentially terrifying.
Yeah.
So the ISIA is about sensing. It's integrated sensing and communication is what it stands for. And they call it emerging technology in wireless networks that combines radar-like sense capabilities with data communication using the same radio signals and hardware. This integration allows mobile networks, such as those evolving towards 6G, to not only transmit information, but also detect, locate, and identify objects or changes in the physical environment, effectively turning the network into a radar sensor. So and they're talking about using it by 2030, mostly for smart cities, but also for automotive and transportation, which is interesting because when talking about Tesla and the autonomous cars, Ford did like a while ago a whole they called it like the mindfulness car concept. And the reason I find this interesting is because there's heart math, right? Heart math is Barbara Marx Hubbard was a huge proponent of heart math, and in itself, there's nothing like necessarily nefarious about it. It's like biofeedback to help you with breathing and meditation, and I don't have a problem with that, except that they've got a project where they're trying to create global coherence based on your heart resonance, and now they're doing it with the neurobiofeedback as well. So neurological resonance and your heart resonance, and trying to create what they call global coherence. And then when I heard, I know this is going off a little bit and it's very conceptual and theoretical, but now Ford doing this mindfulness concept with their cars, with their autonomous cars, they're driving you. And I with things going in the direction they're going with the 6G, I could just see, there's some sort of a and then this ties into the next topic, I guess. But I could see you getting some sort of like tokens for your meditation contributions and your coherence compliance. So I don't know, I don't know if Tesla is going to go in that direction, but it sounds like if Ford did this back in, I think it was like 2018, so it's not new. It sounds like a brainwashing project, but to me. But
here's a headline from just a few days ago. Elon Musk says we'll have all the best medical care, food, housing, and everything else, and a universal high income when robots take over by 2030.
Does that give you confidence? Does that give you confidence, Patrick? Are you
Okay, here's an investment question for you. When does this bubble blow into 1,000 million pieces? You have to wonder. For instance, we saw the dot-com bubble. That was predictable. You didn't know exactly when it was going to pop, but it did in the end, right? And it was horrible. We've seen other bubbles along the way where money went awry, and all of a sudden, boom, it busts. When is this whole thing going to blow up on these people? Do you think it's possible at this point, or do they have enough inertia to just blow away all the guardrails and just do this with impunity? What do you think?
Well, I think it comes down to two things. I think what we saw happen in Nepal where people finally say, I've had enough, right? They storm the parliament, they burn the thing down, and they take care of whoever they see on the street. So I think that's one thing. If we can stay pacified long enough and everything is presented to us in this good fashion, like that's a hard, that article that you just read is a very hard thing for people to go against. When they tell you your life's going to only get better, you're going to have the best medical care, you're going to have the best of this, you're going to have the best of that. Can they keep people pacified long enough until the point where, like Aaron said, our freedoms are gone, 100% gone from the click wrap agreements? We don't, and then some event comes in, that would normally, because here's what I've been saying in the markets is, when they sell you fear, right, the market's probably going higher. But as soon as we start getting sold hope, okay, that's the other side of the coin, right? So we've been sold fear for what, 40, 50 years. Every time the market goes down, they sell us fear, and then the sovereign wealth funds, whoever it is, they come in, they buy the bottom because they have inside information that the central banks are going to back it. I think that changes when they start selling us hope, and the hope is on the flip side of this. As soon as we cross over that barrier, the hope is that we're going to get our life back. We're going to get something like universal basic income. Things are going to look good. This robot's sort of working out. It's sort of cleaning up for after the dog. It's sort of doing these things, and then we start saying to ourselves, I don't know if I'm really happy with this. I don't know if I'm really happy. And then it comes into selling you hope, right? Because you hope that you're going to get back what you once had if you have that memory. So I think that's one thing. Do the people realize what's going on? That's why we do this Technocracy Roundtable, so that we realize this stuff and we actually, like we've all said, technology could be great, and there's a lot of money going into this, so it could really produce great results. We are the most productive country in the world, large country in the world by far. So if you add this in there, all of a sudden our productivity level goes through the roof. We could see a stock market boom like you've never seen before, but we know what happened in 1999, .com. And, so again, it will bubble up. And I think the other side of this too is and we're going to get into this, I think, with the sovereign wealth funds, the central banks, and are they being taken away, right? The U.S. has always had this position of like this, quote unquote, I know this sounds kind of harsh, but, this is the word that gets used in the markets, is like fiscal dominance, right? When we go from quote unquote fiscal dominance, which is this banking and central banking and this system that we're so used to, right? You need to get a loan for a home. What do? You go to the bank. But as soon as we go to a borderless, digital currency, right, where the laws everything gets kind of turned upside down, I think what happens is, we go from fiscal dominance to some sort of a holding tank, because I don't think we can go from whatever we know what here is. I don't know if we know what there is, right? So there's this, kind of space in between here and there, and it could be these sovereign wealth funds, right? Because money goes, assets can go into these sovereign wealth funds, and if we look at Saudi Arabia, they're big backers in a lot of this stuff, right? Between SoftBank and the sovereign wealth funds that pile all the money into this. I think, there's this from here to there in this digital currency, and how are we going to deal with all of that? And I really think how much are we going to tolerate is really the question, I think, Patrick, in terms of when the bubble crashes this time, because we're really creating money out of thin air again, and we're at all-time highs and we're cutting interest rates. This usually, like you said, this isn't a recipe for good things. Can I show a chart real fast?
Mm.
Sure.
Can I show this chart real quickly? I think this will come through okay. So this is essentially that NASDAQ bubble, from 1998. And you can see when we started cutting interest rates, back in, what was it, so we most of us who followed the markets, we remember Alan Greenspan talking about irrational exuberance. That's all the way on the left side of that chart. Then we go through a series of these things, and obviously we get this huge nonlinear move up. And I think this time, again, everybody says it'll be different this time, but I think what will be different this time is how much are people willing to tolerate, and can they get us past the point with a false flag or some sort of an event where we don't have a choice, like a COVID rolls in and we've moved past the point where we never really got a decision. You know what I mean? And then what do? Is the surveillance system in place where we can't do anything and we just accept it? Or can we actually fight back? Does that make sense? I think it's a combination of those two things. I think it's what happened in Nepal is a perfect example. And I think the other thing is this money's just coming out of thin air. It's been coming out of thin air for a long time. $37.5 trillion in debt, unfunded liabilities like you can't imagine. Can this be remedied, or will it never? We might be to the point where, the sovereign debt crisis will come at some point, right? There's so much debt in the system and it will blow up. That will be the thing that kicks it off. And the question is, can they hold that down until they get full control over the system? That's the way I look at it. Does it make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, but before we move on to the Commonwealth Fund, I do want to bring up the digital IDs, because I think that's very relevant to the robots. Because right now we're already starting to see this. Google's starting to talk about, just to do a search, you're going to have to prove you're human. And most of these sites that you go onto now, you have to, they have all these puzzles. TikTok does one that's actually really hard. You have to line it up. I never used TikTok, and I tried to use it yesterday. And to prove you're human, you have to slide the cursor to make the puzzle piece fit. And if you let go too soon, they don't think you're human. And that's actually not that easy even for a human to do, but I don't know. But I think that with the increase of all the robots, and especially with these humanoid robots, I think they're gonna push that harder. All of this, you're gonna have to verify that you're human, and I think that could be a way for them to justify more surveillance. So I'm curious what you all think about that. I mean, right now they're pushing the real ID, which is really digital ID, pretty hard, but they're pushing digital ID in all sorts. Obviously, once they go into these digital currencies, that's going to be an issue with digital ID as well. So I don't know.
Well, I was just saying, they're already pushing. Yeah, they're already pushing digital ID with real ID, but we already have. I mean, even through the Bank Secrecy Act and anti-money laundering laws and know your customer laws, I mean, we essentially already have this anyway. Mm-hmm. It's not a big stretch. It's not like we have to go much further to have effectively a digital ID. And obviously, other countries are moving towards this very quickly. The UN is moving towards this very quickly. I did want to say, though, one thing on the previous point. I mean, I lived through the dot-com bubble. I was there at the beginning in 1995. The one thing that happened during the bubble is we did end up with major companies that changed the entire landscape of the economy, like Amazon. So while there was a lot of rampant speculation on things like pets.com and some of these ridiculous business models, it did transform the economy. I think AI is actually, to Greenspan's comment on irrational exuberance, I think I remember later he admitted that he didn't account for the productivity gains that would happen because of this IT. I actually do think that AI is truly a game changer in terms of productivity. And I mean, I know just from my own, what I'm doing now in terms of automating my workflows and everything else, I think I'm going to look at this 6 months from now and say it's a 100x multiplier in terms of productivity. So that's going to have a big impact from an economic perspective. So to me, this all comes down to who controls it and what their motivations are. But I actually believe we are going to see massive productivity gains. And so then what happens with those productivity gains? And I think this actually ties into the sovereign wealth fund, because as I'm thinking about this, I think the sovereign wealth fund is a vehicle for UBI and a way to actually accelerate technocracy.
The UBI, yeah. I had the same thought, especially since they're talking about using assets. And I don't know, you guys might know about this more than I do, but I know they're talking about using gold. I do just want to make a housekeeping note for people. If you have questions, put it in the chat and put Q : so we know it's a question. So yeah, we'll take those after. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Should we move on to the sovereign wealth fund, or do people have or do any of you have anything you want to add on the robotics first before we move on?
Well, I'd like to add one thing. So, back to Patrick's question, and then also a little bit off of Aaron's there. I think that here's one thing that concerns me is that, when we go into wars, they've been known to just shut our economic system down before. And so, maybe it's not a false flag this time, or like a COVID where they just shut things down, but I could see where they could just shut the financial markets down for a window of time. And then when it comes back up, they just tell you, here's how it is. So for instance, kids didn't know how to use Zoom, right, when they went back to school, but then they did, and the teachers learned how to use it pretty quickly. And so it's that kind of a thing where they shut it down and you wake up and all of a sudden it's like Aaron said, everything's been tokenized, I mean, everything's already happened, and you wake up and you're like, wow, this is a really different world. It's not about a Peloton bike this time. It's about, all your stuff is gone. Everything's been tokenized. we've had this world war, whatever, with Poland and Russia, Europe and Russia, whatever it may be. We seem to be getting diverted away from paying attention to that. You know what I mean? Right now with all these events that are going on, and the fishiness around this Charlie Kirk thing and so forth. So I just think, like, are we setting something up where it's just, they're going to shut it down and you just wake up one day and there it is, you know what I mean? And you're just in it, and there is no transition period. It's like, bam, there it is. So hopefully that goes back to your question a little bit. I'm not sure that this is a gradual letdown, Patrick. I think this might just be a like, bam, bam, there it is. And they could do it in 6 months, right? If they had 6 months, they could roll something like this out. They could install all this stuff and put us on that. So,
yeah. Wow.
The one thing that I think is a bubble with respect to AI is that the whole thing is based on this idea that you need more compute power and you need to use more energy. I mean, we as humans use 20 watts and still the AI can't produce or think the way that we think. So why is it that it doesn't make any sense and it doesn't scale to have to use that much energy? I know when China was coming out with some of their AI models, they thought, oh, hey, here's a breakthrough. It uses, 1/10 the amount of energy and everything else. So I think there will be breakthroughs. So I think if you're going to look for a bubble, you might look for it in some of the data operations, some of the hardware operations, and some of the capacity that people, like the thing that, Sam Altman talked about today. I thought they announced $1 trillion investment today, but at this point, I can't tell what's a meme or what's not on some of this stuff. But clearly, some of that is going to be overkill.
Well, I saw 850 billion for sure, but in this world, what's 150 billion, Aaron? It's just rounding error, right?
Exactly.
They just make up numbers at this point. It's crazy. It's like with the natural asset companies, 500 quadrillion. I mean, at that point, like, why bother even giving you a number? It's just, yeah.
I do want, if I might just interject something, because I've been thinking about this sovereign wealth fund thing a lot. And it just occurs to me that, and this may be just because I've been so focused on Curtis Yarvin, but if you look at the top sovereign wealth funds, they're all controlled by either monarchies or dictators. And so this entire model, in my view, of the U.S. now deciding after not doing a sovereign wealth fund to pursue this seems like part of an effort to consolidate power and move towards this Yarvin-esque monarchical structure. And again, I think J.D. Vance is ultimately who they're setting this up for. Yeah. And that sovereign wealth fund, in conjunction with enhanced executive power, is the bridge to technocracy. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a theory, or at least something that I've been thinking about as I've been looking through this issue.
That's a great point. I just did some research recently on Islamic finance vis-a-vis the Western banking system. That they've made huge inroads into introducing Sharia products into the Western banking system. However, I was kind of surprised when I'd learned the first sovereign wealth fund in the world was created by Kuwait.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. So this was back in 1953, I think it was, and they wanted to preserve the revenue streams for future generations. Sound a little like sustainable development, right?
Yep.
But this is caught on for any autocratic system of governance. For sure.
Yeah, it was 1953. Yeah. I think that theory is accurate. I think certainly they want J.D. Vance. And I think that it ties in with the UBI also, right? Because then they can pacify everybody and control them. And of course, also data mine them, right? They can put on a tokenized kind of I think, conditionally based income, not, it's not going to be the higher, whatever Elon's calling it, where he says everybody's going to live in the life of luxury. This is really funny, actually. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was on Rogan and they were talking about, and I think Rogan just got really high and didn't really know what he was saying, but he kept talking about how we were going to live this life of luxury because the robots were going to do everything, but we're going to have to figure out like how to find meaning in our lives. And then whoever he was interviewing was asking him, well, where's the money going to come from? He's like, oh, well, the robots are going to pay our taxes. And I just thought, I couldn't believe nobody pushed back on this. I just thought it was hilarious. Like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes so much sense. The robots pay the taxes. Got it now. Okay. But I have no idea if that's really the plan. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I thought it was kind of funny. But yeah, I think that it does make sense that it's and the, of course, Pat has done so much work on this with the Islamic financial system and the Sharia law. And I think when you look at these autocratic types of systems, they're very aligned with a Sharia law because it's a strict top-down kind of a system. So it kind of makes sense that that's I think where they're going. And I mean, even when I look at the culture stuff, that's where they're going. I don't know that that's where they'll end up. They may end up because the pendulum does seem to swing, and then you might have these people opting into their own, thinking that they have this freedom, opting into these kind of, more like fiefdom systems, which Yarvin's a proponent of that too. I mean, that's what his Urbit is. It's a network state. So
yeah. The thing about this Islamic finance, it's all based on assets, not debt, because they don't acknowledge debt. They won't do debt. So everything they do is accounted for by assets. The sovereign wealth funds are a good example of that for sure. But the Islamic banks are very, very large at this point. They're all based on assets, not debt. The Western banking system is based on debt. If there's going to be some type of flip-flop at some point, the debt system needs to be done away with, and somehow they need to flip it over into an asset-based system. A sovereign wealth fund would be the first step of that, I think.
Well, they've talked. Sorry, no, go on.
Go ahead.
Oh, I looked into like what would they proposing to, because the big question was where are they going to get the money, because we have so much debt. So historically, most countries who have had a sovereign wealth fund, it was because they had some sort of a surplus to invest in it. I think Norway is the biggest one, and it's because of their oil wealth. So some of the things they were saying was, of course, tariffs, right? Trump's tariffs. He thinks they're going to fund everything. So they're thinking tariffs might be a way, but then they do talk about seized assets. And so they're talking about it from Bitcoin reserve, which I thought was very interesting.
Yes. And how about the tokenization of all the land assets that the United States government
They talk about that
owns
too.
right now? Yeah. 680 million acres of prime real estate, rich with minerals and you name it. That would be huge deal.
They talk about monetizing federal land funds. They say worth up to $200 trillion through sales, expended leasing resources like oil, gas, timber. And then they also do talk about debt insurance, which is interesting. So like tying it, so somehow like ensuring that, but of course I think that would raise inflation. So I don't think that that's going to be a preferable way. And then the other one was international contribution. So pledges from partners. But again, this I think is I guess maybe they're not saying it's debt-based. They're saying pledges from partners such as Japan's $550 billion commitment under a U.S.-Japan trade agreement for investments in semiconductors, pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, energy ships, and quantum computing. And then they also bring up the EU's potential $600 billion and South Korea's $350 billion. And these structures, they are debt financed, special purpose vehicles. That's what I thought, with shared returns. I don't know how that's going to work, but anyway, yeah.
Yeah. One thing to add is in the news, I don't know if you guys saw this, but Saudi Arabia stock soared overnight as they opened up this week 5%. And I think it gained $120 billion in market cap. On the news that they're looking to remove restrictions that allow foreign investor capital. Okay, so this is the first time that they've ever allowed foreign owners to have a majority ownership in a Saudi-based firm. So again, I think it's a two-way thing that's going on. And we know that these sovereign wealth funds, right? Think about these sovereign wealth funds, okay? They're again, they're foreigners in a foreign land, and they're taking these revenues, these surpluses that they've built up, and they're going to some other place and they're investing. So that automatically leans them toward things like the World Economic Forum or something like that, right? Ways to get in on the inside, to hang out, build some buddies, build some networks, right? And so when we think about this, and I think we put this in context, I think it's a two-way street that's starting to happen. And I like Aaron's idea of the universal. Well, I don't like Aaron's idea of the universal basic income, but I think he's correct in the sense that this is really starting to open up the world and it's breaking down barriers, right? And if you're going to have to me, currency means borders, right? Currency and borders are almost the same exact thing to me, right? The currency is representative of the people within that, the culture, the work ethic, the productivity within a boundary. But if we're going to start moving outside that, and it looks like we are, then you can see where this becomes a two-way street now. And you start to see this kind of stuff happen with the Saudis. And the other thing to keep in mind is China's been getting crushed. People don't know that, there's a lot of technology going on there, but economically they've been getting hurt and they can't really stimulate. You wonder if this isn't going to open the door. And I have to think this is connected to that trip that President Trump made to the Middle East, earlier this year when they rolled out the red carpet in Abu Dhabi, in United Arab Emirates and in Saudi Arabia. And I have to think that, again, if you watch the news and you pay attention for a little while, you see something like this and all of a sudden it's hard to not connect these dots, that it's a two-way street, borders are coming down. And you can start to see the trade opening up and people doing things that they've never done before. That usually raises a red flag to me. You can now have a majority stake in a Saudi company.
I think this is all just consolidation and move towards global government. When researching more on these sovereign wealth funds, a lot of these sovereign wealth funds are being tapped to fund UN Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This is a primary funding source for that. And so, and I think we're just playing right into that. The U.S. is playing right into that because if we have $100 to $200 trillion worth of assets that we could tokenize, then that's more than we have in debt, right? And so we already have UBI in the U.S. Alaska already has UBI. They've had UBI for a long time. They get if you live in Alaska, you get a dividend from oil. Yep. This whole UBI concept is interesting.
It's from a sovereign wealth fund, actually. Yeah. Their UBI is from a sovereign. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I think all this is pushing in one direction. I think this is where it ends up. And I don't even know if Trump understands why he's proposing it or why he's pushing it. I mean, I think this is being more architected by Lutnick and others.
Yeah.
Well, sorry. I was just going to say, he also said that he might use TikTok as an investment in TikTok to make the sovereign wealth fund. Sorry. Yeah.
What's the effect now? The largest pool of untouched assets in the world, at least in our country for sure, are all of the retirement funds, like California Retirement Fund, the state funds, the 401ks and the IRA programs, all that money is basically locked up in trusts. You can't, investors can't touch it by and large unless their contract allows them to do it. But now with this, with the requirement, well, if at this point the requirement is being put in place that that these funds can now invest in Bitcoin, this is a new thing to me. What is going to be the effect of these type of funds investing in Bitcoin versus the traditional assets that we have at this point? And that includes things like gold, I'm sure, and real estate. Some investment funds can invest in real estate, but mostly it's probably in stocks and bonds, et cetera. What do you think?
You want to take that one first, Aaron, or do you want me to go and then you can go?
Aaron would have something to say on that.
Well, I mean, I would say in general, my assumption is going to be that these large funds like CalPERS are not going to be putting a significant percentage. I'm sure it will be at least deemed a high risk asset, and so there will only be so much of an allocation to it. Obviously, I think that Bitcoin is largely a scam at this point, designed to provide exit liquidity for the people that are in it now and to transfer wealth. On the other hand, I've studied CalPERS before, and CalPERS makes some pretty horrible investments based on social investing strategies. I actually did an article on this, I guess 17 years ago now, but it was about during the financial collapse. It turns out that CalPERS is one of the largest funders of venture capital funds in the entire country. And one of the reasons that so many venture capital or so many startups are in Silicon Valley and in California is because CalPERS is the largest investor in venture capital firms there. And they would actually state, we will only invest here if the companies are within the state of California or they're within this geographic constraint. And then it turns out when the financial collapse happened, CalPERS was particularly hard hit because they had a ton of investment in real estate. I know this is a bit of a sidebar, but in commercial real estate and residential real estate in California. And so what they did was when the venture capital funds would make a capital call, because when a venture capital fund raises money, it doesn't raise it all up front and put it in a bank account. They make capital calls when they go to make a group of investments. CalPERS basically said, well, we're not going to we'll honor the capital call, but we won't invest in your future funds. And so a whole bunch of startup companies got wiped out because CalPERS' social investing strategy in California made it such that they had a liquidity problem and couldn't fund VCs. So that's my little sidebar on that. But I mean, I think the Bitcoin thing I don't think it's going to have a huge impact because I don't see a huge percentage of funds doing it, but it's still a bad idea.
Do you think that this would open the door for these type of funds to have tokens in their possession?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that's the point of it, actually.
Absolutely.
I would think. I would think that all of these tokens that are going to be released when national assets are whatever tokenized, what a perfect place to put them in the first place and cough up all the assets that is held in these funds in the first place, all liquid, I have to say. Who would get their hands on those assets at that point? Maybe it is possible that my understanding of tokens are just off the wall. I don't understand the mechanism as well as I should. But it seems to me if you have a real estate asset like 2,000 acres of land, if you tokenize it, it seems to me that the value of the land is all of a sudden lifted. And it could be distributed by title even to the four winds at that point. If that's possible with like 401k plans, if the value is lifted from their plans and they're left with tokens, is something wrong with this picture here?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's it. They're talking about using 401ks and pension plans as well. And they're talking, but I've heard them say it suggested. I watched a whole series of the clips with Trump talking about his sovereign wealth fund, and then a bunch of people from all over the world. It was a banker from Norway. There was a Saudi talking about how unorthodox this would be because we don't have the surplus. But they had proposed that there might be discussions about using 401ks, and Social Security was another one they were talking about.
But does the value get lifted when?
I think so, because if it's an asset, then I would think that there's no value anymore because you don't have any equity in it, right?
Well, no, the tokens aren't necessarily a bad thing. You can think of the tokens as just being a digital representation of a share. So, I mean, right now, funds invest in REITs, which are just, and you have share certificates representing your ownership in real estate. Tokens are just an evolution of the database itself. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be a liberating thing in the sense that it takes a lot of the friction out of people's ability to invest. So it might actually open the market up so that more people can buy and sell and invest in these types of assets than can today, because typically these things are restricted to high net worth individuals or particular structures. It could be a good thing. And I've been interested in tokenization for a long time. The way they're going to implement it, however, which is my concern, is in a way where there's actually more control. It's like giving more control over your shares to these authoritarian parties, where they can monitor and track and censor not just your money, but all of your financial instruments. So to me, that's the downside of tokenization, is that it's actually more centralization and more tracking. But there are problems with the way our existing systems work for how shares are traded in financial instruments, because they're in centralized databases that can get hacked. And there are a lot of problems with centralized databases, but the global economy runs on centralized databases. So tokens could add security and could add an ability to open up markets, but it could also add tyranny. And so this is why I always say this is kind of a technocracy versus freedom. And I actually see tokenization as a battleground for this, because you can get two different flavors of these tokens.
Well, I think the concern is that, so the way they're marketing it, because I've heard Larry Fink talk about this, and he says that it's going to democratize investment, right? So they keep, one of their selling points is that it's fractionalized. However, it's fractionalized. So yes, theoretically, that means the little guy can get in, but it also means that the big guy can swoop up the majority of the shares, which I think is likely what would happen. And to your question about whether or not the value gets lifted, I think it does get lifted, because it now becomes like a, like a stock where, let's say you have people owning fractional shares of a piece of real estate. I think real estate's a really good example because it's so tangible. So then who has controlling rights to that property? Right? It's not going to be the person who has a small, like $100 equivalent of tokens. It's going to be the person who has maybe the $1 million worth of tokens. So, or it might not be any of those. Through the ecosystem management services, it might be some maybe it won't be exactly a natural asset company, but it could be some kind of equivalent. So I think once you start adding that infrastructure of the tokenization, I mean, I guess in theory there could be a way that it doesn't happen, but I don't see it.
Well, again, it already happens that way, though. It is already centralized, and it's controlled through centralized databases that are controlled by these financial institutions.
But you don't do that not with tangible assets. I mean, you don't have that with real estate right now.
Certainly, there are all kinds of investment firms that form LLCs to buy office buildings and have shareholders. This happens all the time.
Right, but when they have, but they have equity in it. So,
well,
right,
yeah. The tokens represent equity. It's the tokenization of the equity of the real estate. And there's an ability, again, it depends on how it gets implemented. And again, I don't think it's going the right way, which is why I was interested in it. And then I'm seeing the way that it's happening right now. But the whole point of it is to have a digital token that represents a share, instead of a situation where you have a centralized database and multiple third parties, which is what we have right now with stock certificates and everything else. You have this company, DTCC, that owns a company called Seed & Company, which is run by an ex-CIA guy, and they house all of the physical stock certificates for publicly traded companies.
They're a clearing company, right? I mean, they're a clearing house. So that's on like all of the transactions. It's
yeah, but they physically have possession of all the stock certificates, and it takes 3 days to settle.
Unless somebody has requested their own. You can get your own stock certificate. I mean, most banks can't do it, but you
really
can.
Hard.
It's really hard, but it takes 3 days to do the settlement. The whole point is, if you do a blockchain correctly, which is what Patrick Byrne was trying to do with Overstock.com and the whole thing he was doing, then all of the naked short selling and all of the corruption that comes on Wall Street because of the way that these things are handled through these databases and dark pools goes away. And now you can actually trade ownership, fractional ownership, in a variety of different assets, but there's a permanent record of it. You actually get rid of the fraud is one way of going about doing it. Again, What I'm suggesting now is the kind of tokenization that Larry Fink is talking about is going to be one where DTCC is still involved. All of these third parties are still involved. And now you have this entire ability for censorship of these tokens. And so this is why that's kind of the tyranny side of it. But if you didn't have that, this is actually an improvement to the existing system, which uses databases and multiple third parties, which adds friction and keeps a ton of people out of the marketplace and opens the market to massive amounts of fraud.
Interesting.
Well, and
I
on
remember,
Oh,
I
go ahead.
remember in the financial meltdown between 2008, 10 to 10, when the derivative market was fractionalized by creating all of these crazy tranches based on the risk of the underlying assets, that all mortgages. And when it came time to settle not the score, but when it came time to unwind those mortgages, there was no way to trace back the ownership of those mortgages to the real property. So all of a sudden, you have people staying in their houses and not knowing who to pay the mortgage to. Some people just ended up with their house outright, and this debt is still there, but nobody's come to collect the debt. That was a nightmare that almost took the world to its knees. Is there the same dynamic here possible, where it's about the original, in that case, where the mortgage is tied to a piece of property, the title is tied to a piece of property as well. Is there a possibility of that kind of a scenario where these financial instruments, tokens as well, can be so, the word is so confused, obfuscated, to where nobody can understand what happened when it gets sprayed to the wind, and you can't trace back to where the title is?
Well, do you want to add something to that, Aaron?
Well, that could happen, or the opposite could happen,
Yeah.
which is where you can actually see every single title and you can actually drill in. So whereas right now, not everybody has access to all this information. You can't even see what's in these mortgages. So you have firms bundling these things. Nobody looks at it. Then the rating agencies bless it. But if you actually had tokens that represented these assets, you could actually tie the title directly to it, so that when you view the digital token, you can actually view the title. So there are, again, it depends on how it's implemented. When I think about tokens, I think of it being on an immutable ledger where you can track things. And the beauty of that model is, again, these centralized databases aren't immutable ledgers. People can go in and delete things. People can hack things. The whole point of blockchain in one regard is that it provides a permanent record that no one can delete, and that allows you to see and truly track the record of this. But that isn't necessarily the way all tokens have to be implemented. You could implement them in a way where you still have third parties that can program them and control them. And so unfortunately, that's the direction that we're going. And my guess is, given the amount of money that Wall Street makes on obfuscation today by being able to manipulate these things. In fact, Patrick Byrne estimated that pension funds lost $2 trillion in 2008 during the financial collapse. I mean, basically what you've had is you had companies like Goldman Sachs and others loaning out shares of pension funds used in short selling, and then not giving any of the economics to the pension funds and ripping them off for trillions of dollars. This has literally been going on for a long time. Why Patrick Byrne got so interested in tokenization was specifically to address this type of problem, the kind of fleecing that was going on, because we have a system that isn't transparent. But again, you can implement tokens in a way where you end up with the worst of all worlds, because you end up giving the same intermediaries control and programmability. So this is why, to me, this is the battleground on all of this, which is that tokenization could add either transparency or privacy, depending upon what the situation is and what is needed, or it could be used as a complete control system that's tied into digital IDs and essentially the theft of everyone's assets. And so that's what's on the line here.
Yeah. Well, let me to add for a second. So I'm of the belief that 2008 was a setup, okay, and it was basically a big wealth and power transfer. The central bank came in and did a bailout, and guess who showed up to actually manage all that? BlackRock, right? BlackRock slapped QSIP numbers on everything, and they managed the Fed's way through it because the Fed didn't have the resources to do it. Fast forward to COVID, same thing. Right before COVID came along, there was a 2019 repo crisis in August, right before everything kicked off. Okay. So again, another wealth and power transfer. So if you remember back, I think back to the 401ks, I think they're sitting ducks. Okay. I don't think these technocrats can leave their hands off this massive amount of money, because if you look, baby boomers are hitting this massive point in time where, their assets are going to get transferred down the generation. So what better time to come in and steal it all, right? So how do they do that? So I've been saying for a long time that there's a guy back in the day, if you remember, he's put out a bunch of books, Harry Dent. You remember him? He would always talk about, remember that guy? So he'd put out these books. You haven't heard anything from Harry Dent in a while, right? Again, fear's gone, right? Now they're getting ready to sell the hope, okay? But he put out 6 or 7 books, and he got tons of play for 2000 to 2015, maybe something like that. So keep that in mind here when we think about, this situation where, how are they going to get access to these 401ks? And so I've been watching the private equity space, and I've been saying, you watch, when they're done with this private equity space, and this will get us back to the sovereign wealth funds, when they're done with the private equity space, you'll see them open that up to the public. And that's exactly what they're doing, right? They're taking this little bastion of wealth that the elites have had forever, right? You got to be a qualified eligible participant. You have to have a certain amount of money. You have to have a certain amount of experience, right? And then you can get in. And then what do you get into? You get into their machine, like Carlyle Group, right? They're located, they got locations in DC, they got lawyers in DC, right? So the whole thing's rigged, right? So you got this big private equity machine going, and they invest in what? Defense, war, contractors. They all have their specialty, right? But here's the thing is that I said they're going to open up this private equity to the public. You watch, and they're going to get the 401ks to come into this, okay? So again, it's another wealth and power transfer. We know we're on the bubble of a sovereign debt crisis, so we can't push this game again like we did in 2008 or COVID. I think that game's done. I think the game now is to just get what's out there. And the way they're going to do this, I saw this happen in the UK this week too. They're opening up private equity to UK. So when you start seeing this happen around the world, it's the same thing like Saudi Arabia, opening up, all of a sudden they're going to allow people to come in. They've never allowed this to happen before. Why are they all of a sudden letting us in? It's a red flag. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to let us in. And then, and same thing with Bitcoin, right? All these things to get us into these things. And again, money markets hit $7.2 trillion not that long ago because interest rates are fairly high. And people finally, the antelopes finally came back in the water because the crocodile hadn't bit them in a while. Now they're back, they're coming, the stock market's going to all-time highs. They can't resist it. So what's Wall Street going to do? They're going to try to sell, all the salesmen will come out and they're going to move everybody out of these money market funds into the stock market. And they're going to put them into this private equity. And now all of a sudden, guess what's available? Who do you think set the game up for the private equity? Again, it sets it back up to the sovereign wealth fund. It sets it up for all this stuff. It's an easy taking, right? That's what I think they're going to do. And guess what? Instead of and here's the other thing. Let me add one more thing. There's a real division between, I think, Charlie Kirk. A lot of the reason I think he was so popular was because there was a division between the baby boomer and the younger generation. The younger generation feels ripped off by the baby boomer because they feel like they've just enriched themselves their whole lives. And I think there's this like a friction between these two age groups. And I think that there's I just think that that's going to factor into this whole thing. I don't know how it's going to play out, but if there's a great taking and there's universal basic income for the baby boomer class, I think it's going to get fascinating when you watch. And this is the Civil War component, right? You can see where this is one of those Civil War components. It's going on with the global war component too. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Hopefully I pulled that together. But again, I think private equity is tied in tightly with these sovereign wealth funds too. So there's a lot. We could go on for an hour on that, but hopefully that kind of pulls the 401k thing into the whole mix.
Would you say that's something like a pump and dump operation in?
Could you explain that a little bit more?
Well, like pumping up the asset values to offload them into weaker hands.
Well, I think, when we talked about, Aaron said, 850 billion, a trillion, who cares, right? That's what OpenAI is going to do. We got $4 trillion coming into the AI space over the next 5 years, right? That gives these guys a plunger effect, right? They can, just like the NASDAQ bubble, right? We saw that when Greenspan came out and said, what was the word? irrational exuberance, and then like Aaron said, the productivity came out of it. So again, they know what they're going to get out of this. I mean, they know optimists, these guys have calculated all this stuff out, right? They've got this. And isn't it funny that the baby boomers, like they're hitting the peak, right? The peak of assets, right? Assets are on highs. Isn't it funny that all this stuff kind of aligns around 2026 to 2030?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So,
wow.
What are your thoughts on the gold? Because they're claiming that America has more gold than anywhere in the world. I don't know that that's actually true, but that's what they're saying, and they're saying that they could use that for the sovereign wealth fund. And I know you've been talking a lot about gold. Obviously it's skyrocketing, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, we've seen central banks be big buyers over the last, really from 2013 to 2023. You can get pretty good data on the amount of money that's flown into, been moved into these central banks. And so the question is, what are they doing? Central banks don't always make the greatest moves. But I think gold, it's funny because in 1998 to 2001, I was, saying people should buy gold and everybody just laughed. It was a dead asset. Now it's the exact opposite. You can't say sell gold, but that's what I've been talking about is maybe sell gold and buy silver because the gold silver ratio got to 100 to 1. So 100 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. And if you look at historically, there's a good chance that that could come back at least to 80, maybe 70, maybe 60. What would that mean? More of this, more robots. They need more silver than they need gold, and silver. So yes, I think that the precious metal is a great place to be. I think, palladium, platinum, they all have their place. All these precious metals have their place. When gold's this high, though, and every independent media is selling some gold, right? Everybody's got a gold, and right, and they're backing a lot of things. And so I just think sometimes, when the last buyers have bought, usually who else is left to buy? And, what then happens? Then you get sellers, and so can silver outperform gold? Probably so. It just makes sense from a gold silver ratio. Could gold go to 5,000 for sure? It could,
I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
They're talking about using it to fund this sovereign wealth fund.
Yes.
Are you talking about gold? Yeah.
If the federal government, if they would take all their gold holdings, nobody knows how much they have. They said
Right.
they have, as
They say they have the most in the world. Yeah.
Exactly. It's crazy, but
The
nobody
Vatican might have the most in the world, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
But if the federal government were to market all the gold that they own right now, it would reflect the current price of gold, not the whatever $40+ on the books right now. That would still be a spit in the bucket compared to the national debt. But it would be a step in the right direction for sure if they did that. And there's nothing preventing them to do it enough. In fact, they could raise the price if they wanted to $10,000 or $20,000, mark to mark. Say that this is our new value, and that could be a strategy to settle a lot of issues with sovereign debt.
But of course, the problem with this is if they did mark to market what they claim they hold, it's less than $1 trillion. If I'm reading this correctly, so that's we were adding $2.5 trillion this year. So
I know it wouldn't solve the problem.
Yep.
But nevertheless, it's something they could throw into the sovereign wealth fund.
Sure.
Well, if they're throwing TikTok, they may as well throw that into,
Hey, the stock on TikTok that's going to be worth $50 trillion in 5 years, they say, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a little concerned about that with TikTok. They're essentially that makes it then state media, right? If they do that. So right now it's Chinese state media. I guess better if it's our state media. I don't know. Yeah. But well, I don't know if I think we don't have too many questions right now, so we can keep going. But if anybody does have a question, just a reminder to put Q : so that we know that it's a question. Yeah.
I have to say that people who have a 401k should be concerned that these people are eyeballing their wealth
Oh, yeah.
at this point,
Absolutely.
because they're going to figure out a way how to spring it from you and put it into their own pockets. So this is going to be a huge thing going forward. There's no other asset pool in the world at this point that's rich as this.
Right.
And it's just sitting there. This must drive these people insane. Knowing all this, yeah. I think of how Lutnick lusted over the 680 million acres, and on national TV, and I could just see him lusting over. Ooh, if we could just get our hands of all that 401k money, whoa, we could make 1/4%. I could just see him saying that. So we should probably be aware this may be coming for anybody who has a 401k.
Yep. No, I think that's spot on. I think that's so true.
Well, and you had also mentioned, that this is all looks like it's funneling towards the Agenda 2030 and 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And in typical fashion, the marketing around this Trump Sovereign Wealth Fund is that we're finally going to be able to, reap the rewards of all the resources that we have here because the environmentalists have blocked it. And so they're saying that, of course, that they're telling us that the people will become very wealthy off of this, but it sounds kind of like they're just creating a dialectic so that we don't think this is tied into the World Economic Forum UN agenda, when really it is, because they that's one of the selling points they keep talking about is how we're finally going to be able to capitalize off of, all the resources that we have here that the environmentalists have capped from us.
Well, the other thing is there's nothing in the law that requires the sovereign wealth fund to be managed in any specific way. This is the problem with this, is it's widely open to interpretation. And so however they're designing it, my personal belief is that this is going to be designed in a way that will benefit Vance, that will benefit this consolidation of power and benefit technocracy. But maybe that's right, maybe that's not. But what if they establish this thing and then Gavin Newsom is elected? This is another one of these things where you have to think through, well, under various scenarios, what's going to end up happening here. And essentially what they're going to do is they're just going to be consolidating all of these assets and putting it in the hands of a smaller and smaller, tighter and tighter circle of people, which is generally a bad thing, I would argue.
Well, I mean, when their plans, David, when you're talking about people like Vance, obviously Yarvin, a lot of the agenda that we've seen already in just these past 5-6 months already, it looks like they're creating an unbound executive. Remember, there was the Heritage Foundation created this Project 2025, and of course Trump came out repeatedly saying, I have nothing to do with it, I denounce it, I want nothing to do with it. But meanwhile, there's like a tracker and we're already 49% through this initiative. And Project 2025 is the Heritage Foundation, which is very tied in with Vance, actually. Right? The CEO.
Was it Russ Vought? Was it Russ Vought that did most of the writing on that? Is that who that was?
Yeah. He's very he's involved in the Heritage Foundation. But there's also I'm blanking on the guy's name, but who is very tight with Vance, and the Rockbridge Foundation, right? That which was Thiel.
Buzzkirk. Is that right, Aaron? Buzzkirk?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's another one, but the one who is the head of I'll look it up, but yeah, so it looks like they are trying to create, essentially it's an unbound executive, right? The Constitution was designed where we have 3 branches of government, so they can be checks and balances for each. The executive branch is not supposed to be the all-consuming power. It's not supposed to be a dictator. It's not supposed to be a CEO either. It's not a monarch of any kind. But what they're doing is trying to consolidate. That's the whole agenda with the Project 2025, is putting all this power into the executive branch. And a lot of quote unquote conservatives were championing it because it was there was a lot of rhetoric that they liked, that they was very palatable to them. But as Aaron rightly points out, what happens when, a Democrat gets elected, then all the power and all the initiatives they want to put forth are still in their purview, because now you've consolidated it all into the executive branch. And people don't typically think about that when they're thinking, oh, we should just weaponize their tactics against them. Well, what happens when that gets flipped right back on you? That's the reason there is supposed to be the reason the Constitution was created was not for partisan lines. It was so that there were these checks and balances. And so, yeah, I could see how the sovereign wealth fund could, tie right into that consolidation.
So basically, what you're saying is that that Congress would be separated from anything that has to do with the creation of money that we use in our society. I think that's the implication.
Right now, part of the reason the sovereign wealth fund hasn't actually been executed, right, implemented, is because it has to be approved by Congress. And right now, Congress hasn't. I don't know the reason for that. I haven't done enough research on that, but I know he proposed it back in February, and we're here and still, but constitutionally, Congress would have to approve it.
How much
at this point?
Yeah, go ahead.
At this point, it seems to me that Trump is already investing money into private companies. However,
yeah, that's how they're going about it, because Congress hasn't. So right now they have started to privatize it, and they have made privatizing it already. That they have, yeah. Which, people hear, and again, this is where the marketing is so effective, because people on the quote unquote right here privatized, and they're like, oh, this is free market, but it's not. I mean, I don't think Palantir is like free market in any regard. That's just one example, right? So, yeah, it's Kevin Roberts who I'm thinking of. But yes,
Chris Buskirk.
Buskirk, right? It is another one, but no, the one I was thinking of, because he's the president of the Heritage Foundation, is Kevin Roberts, and so he was involved with Vance.
Yeah, well, and in these sovereign wealth funds, right, the law is sort of amorphous. It's really built to be interpreted, especially if we're moving to a different currency and there is no geographic boundary, right? And then you're like, which set of laws are going to apply to it? You're crossing between all these boundaries of law. And then you look at what we put in there, right? Lithium Americas just went in there, right? Just recently, that was one that I think we're talking about putting a 10% stake in that, the U.S. is. And so essentially, I think the stock doubled today, but you can think about that lithium, right? Goes back to the robots. What do you need? You need a lot of lithium. Intel, right? 9.9% stake in that. And not only that, then NVIDIA was coerced for another $5 billion to come in behind and support Intel. So that was I think $14 or $15 billion to come in and backstop Intel. And that goes back to also, all those grants that were set aside in the last administration. Then you have MP Materials. So again, it sounds good, right? Rare Earth Mineral Company, that one sounds good. And then the defense ones, that goes back to Lutnick, right? Talking about Lockheed, putting Lockheed into a sovereign wealth fund. Private equity firms. I started cross-referencing some of the Trilateral Commission and Council on Foreign Affairs and the sovereign wealth funds and crisscrossing the names, and you start finding some of these interesting things like Bessemer, right? Well, Bessemer is one of these. It's a private equity firm that was out today, just today. Alex Ferrara, one of the partners there, was saying private investors are pouring money into defense. So you can see this private equity into the defense system. So again, they're starting to build this sovereign wealth fund up. And so far, everything it's got a story that goes to it, right? It's all in the name of defense. But pretty soon you start crossing the boundaries where it's not in the name of defense. And that's, I think, that's
anymore. Department of War.
Yeah, right. The Department of War. That's
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so Vance wrote the foreword for Robert's book, and I didn't know the title of the book, but the book is The Dawn's Early Light, Burning Down Washington to Save America. Right, we have to phoenix the Republic to save the West. Once again, yeah. But, yeah.
So in essence, Trump is doing a backdoor sovereign wealth fund right now he used the CHIPS Act to do the thing with Intel, revenue sharing deals with NVIDIA and AMD. So they're pursuing a version of a sovereign wealth fund through these kinds of backdoor techniques. And then I guess at some point we'll probably formalize it.
It's because Congress would have to approve it, and Congress hasn't. And so, they've already started to move through the private sector.
It'll be so large at that point where Congress can't refuse. they'll have to pass it at that point.
Yep.
Or they'll just, send them all a 3,000 page, bill that they have till the next morning. They have like 12 hours to read. And say, here, sign this, as they typically do.
How many technocrats does it take to write a bill for Congress?
Zero, because the AI writes it for them.
All of
Right.
them and none of them, all in one.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember when Elon Musk said we were going to use AI to read all of the bills?
Yeah.
I mean, we can, but I guess that didn't really take off as a concept for Congress.
Yeah, because they don't even
they
read
don't
the
want
AI.
to know. They don't want to
Congress
know.
They don't know
Well,
how
they
to
just
use
don't.
AI to do that.
They
They
don't.
don't want to know anyway.
To
Yeah.
their credit, there's no way they could read it. Like, it's that they're this thick, and they get like 12 hours. This happens with our state legislators too. They get handed these bills at the 11th hour, and then they're expected to read it and to vote on it. And it's not humanly possible. So I guess they could use AI to do a summary, but you're going to summarize like 2,000 pages? Good luck with that.
Yeah, what you need to do is find the gotchas. The gotchas are always buried in oblique text, and there's no way that these legislators have the capability of writing a prompt, for instance, for ChatGPT or any other AI program that would sift out the things they're looking for, the gotchas. And so I can't imagine that any simple summary would produce any meaningful anything out of it.
Of course
Yeah.
not. No.
Yeah.
And then it's also like, who's programming the AI that's doing the summary, and what don't they want you to know? Right? So, because it's very selective what's going to be chosen in that summary.
Yeah.
Well, the
Yeah.
question is, who's actually writing that 3,000 page bill and who's actually assembling it? That's who we really need to find. Who's writing it and who's assembling it? Because that's not one person writing it. It's a lot of,
No.
people assembling it. So that's the
And it's
that's the genesis.
And it's not usually, it's done over time. That we see this all the time, right? Like the omnibus bill that was rolled out, you saw things in there that were from a decade ago. Like they get pushed through, right? They didn't get pushed through at the time. And so then they shove it into these monstrous bills. So it's not, no, of course it's not one person, but it's not even done at once. It's done over like a long chunk of time where things that didn't get passed through, then they get snuck in.
So then the follow-up question is, if it's been written over a long time, then why aren't the assistants and everyone aware of all this? It's clearly being kept from the politicians. It's clearly being kept from them so that, when they slide stuff in there. It's just like Aaron's been talking about, we've been talking about the Genius Act and the Clarity Act. I mean, if you polled people, I bet most people don't even know those words, what those two are. And that's part of the transfer, right, Aaron? That's part of this transfer process out of the hands of Congress and into the hands of potentially sovereign wealth funds, right? Could you see that those two things are leading out of the power of Congress to even have power and into maybe a sovereign wealth fund type of a situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Genius Act and the Clarity Act allow for the tokenization of all of these assets, and that will hyper accelerate the formation of a sovereign wealth fund. And again, nobody's even opposing it. Nobody's even talking about it. Or the people that should be raising concerns about it are actually supporting it, which is a bigger problem. People are just saying, oh, well, it's crypto, so it must be good. It's going to be a bull market for crypto. That tends to be a lot of what happens in crypto is people look at it as, oh, it's people are doing something with a press release that talks about crypto. That means the number is going to go up and my portfolio is going to go up without actually digging into any of the details or reading what any of it's about.
Yeah. No, I think that a lot of people do have that response. Like a lot of people, if they have heard of the Genius Act at all, it's they're thinking, oh, this is great because people have been told that the crypto is freedom money, right? That's what I keep hearing. I mean, I keep hearing it with Bitcoin too, that it's freedom money. But if he does use the Bitcoin to tie it to the reserve, which he did talk about. I mean, I remember at the Bitcoin conference last year, Trump did say that he wanted to make it tied to the reserve, which is kind of what they're saying with the sovereign fund too. Then it would not be. I mean, there's nothing freedom about that.
Well, no, but they came out and said that, and the original plan was to buy 1 million Bitcoin over some short period of time, and then to hold it for at least 20 years. This was the original plan. My understanding is they've backed off of that, and they're using civil asset forfeiture now as the only mechanism that they currently have ongoing, which should be horrifying to everyone. But this was discussed before about how they're going to build the sovereign wealth fund. Confiscation of assets may be part of it. Well, this is actually I have friends that have lost millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin as part of this, and so that is very much still a strategy. But they may come back and, just because they said they're pausing this million Bitcoin purchase thing for a while doesn't mean they're not going to bring it back. They very well might.
When FDR confiscated all the gold from American citizens, it was just boom, that it's over.
Yep.
Give it to us. And under threat of the law, I guess, a gun, people did it. Most people, a few holdouts. But otherwise, is this kind of the same thing that we see in slow motion at this point? Confiscation of assets, especially when you think about things like eminent domain as well. Is this a slow motion repeat of the same thing?
I think so, and in some ways, it's easier because Bitcoin, it is transparent and it is on a public ledger. So at least if you had gold in your house, the government didn't know you had gold in your house. The government can figure out everyone who has Bitcoin, and at this point, because you're buying it through multiple layers of third parties like BlackRock, they'll just go in and confiscate the entire BlackRock ETF. So in many ways, it's going to be easier to confiscate all of these assets based on the way that they're being tokenized. It doesn't have to be that way, but that is the way that they're headed. That's absolutely the way that they're headed.
So it seems to me, just to reiterate this concept of an asset-based system versus a debt-based system, we know that someday that this debt thing is going to explode in a million pieces. When? Who knows? But they've kicked the can down the road all these years. At some point, if somebody pulls the plug on the debt-based system and said, Fed, get out of here. Fed, all the mortgages and all the stuff based on debt in our country, we're going to just wipe that out and convert everything over to an asset-based system. At that point, the one who owns the assets is going to be making all the rules. That would play into a sovereign wealth fund for sure, because that's based on assets, not on debt, right?
Yep.
And all the other things that we're talking about, the confiscation of wealth, et cetera, it seems to me at this point it's increasingly likely or easy to flip over into an asset-based system like the Saudis have and the Islamic world has. And we would basically kind of look like they do right now with their asset-based system. They don't have any debt at all. But everything, you can't do anything. The people don't like that system for sure, because look at how many people are fleeing their countries to get to Europe. At this point, they don't like it at all. So
no.
if they were prosperous there, they would be fine with it. But obviously, they're not. I wonder. I just have to speculate. What would the asset-based system look like in America if they actually could figure it out how to do it?
Well, I would argue that prior to 1971, we kind of were an asset-based system, right? When our money was backed by gold, that was somewhat asset-based. And so you could do that, and you could back a currency by a whole basket of assets. You could back it by gold, land, everything that we've been talking about. I don't know. Again, I've been thinking about this a lot, but not from the perspective of even nation states, but from the perspective of creating parallel systems where people are just trading using asset-based systems, which there's a lot that you can do with that. It's a pretty, and there are millions of variations on it. There are certainly issues that you have to work through, namely verifying that the assets actually exist and a whole variety of other things. But this debt-based system idea hasn't worked out too well historically.
Well, and one thing to kind of throw in there is, the elephants leave footprints, and we're starting to see, like Japan, for instance, from a debt-based perspective, watching China, watching Singapore, watching Japan, but Japan, just one thing to throw in there in terms of a timing mechanism for people to keep an eye on is, Japan has very weak leadership now from the prime minister and also in their Bank of Japan. And and so we've seen offices restaffing up, right? The big brokerage houses staffing up. And we just saw Warren Buffett exceed 10% in Mitsui, okay, a big trading operation. And not only that, he's loaded up on 5 or 6 of them, okay, of these big trading. So I would think that the sovereign debt crisis is set to start in Japan. We've thought that for a long time. It's starting to fit like that, that's where it's going to probably start. And I don't know enough about, I think Japan's just sort of out of the equation because it's so tied to the West. But I think it's interesting because it'll be interesting to watch and see how that evolves and how quickly it evolves. Because I also heard Warren Buffett say, and again, he's getting up there in age, but, he and his right-hand man who's going to take over, they were both saying that they're making investments in things in Japan that they're never going to sell, right? And so that raises red flags when I see them going above the percentages that they normally would, because now it kicks them into a whole different class when they go over certain percentages. Right now, they have to deal with certain things. So again, this whole Asia area and the Middle East is interesting to watch in terms of, like we were saying, the Middle East, not fans of debt, Japan, a lot of debt. So much so that when the government issues the debt, nobody shows up to buy it. The Bank of Japan buys 97% of it. You know what I mean? So again, this is a flawed system it's going to fail. And when you see the big guys moving in there, I don't know. That tells me that this is going to be slower than what we think. Part of me thinks it's just going to be a war and it's going to be an overnight shutdown, and then they just shut the system down and move us into unit. So again, those are the two things to watch for in Japan. Is this a slow process, a slow grind? That's what that would say. The other thing would say, it's just one of those shutdowns like FDR takes the gold, you know what I mean? And it's there one day and it's gone the next. So those are just two things I wanted to throw in there in terms of, regionally and with the different laws. And I don't know if I think Japan does have a sovereign wealth fund, but I'm not really sure. I didn't do much research on that. So.
Right. Does anybody have any thoughts on how social impact financing might tie into all of this? Because that's a big increasing sector.
It really is.
Yeah, huge. I mean, this definitely has major implications for tokenization. Yeah.
ASU, that's Arizona State University, is headed by a guy named Michael Crow. He's been the president since 2001, I think it is. That's a long tenure for sure. He's transformed the education system there and exported to the whole world a model of social impact for education. He's also the chairman of In-Q-Tel.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
You have to figure, what does this mean? Well, he's set up a system in the last 6 years. He set up a system of, he calls them sandboxes here in our area, where there's geographic a bunch of square blocks put into a unit that can be used for testing 5G and other schemes that startup companies want to experiment with. And if anything comes out of it good, then In-Q-Tel can pick up the first round of investments.
Right.
But at this point, he's exported this concept of education for social impact all over the world. He brags on it. How many schools and universities this philosophy has spawned. So it's just one step removed from what you said. These people are incessantly occupied with the social impact. This is the science of social engineering from the 1930s even. This will never get out of their mind, for sure.
Yeah. What did you say his name was? Just so I can look it up later.
Michael Crow,
Okay.
Crow. Does it have an E? I don't remember, but
Okay.
it's Crow,
Yeah.
like eat crow.
Right. Yeah. He crow. Fitting. Yeah. Wow.
But if you look at this, I'm looking at this now, 67% of sovereign wealth funds incorporate SDGs.
Of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And development funds prioritize national social goals. So this is already a huge part of this.
It is, and I have to
why I
say this.
asked.
Yeah, I have to say this. This from the get-go, from the time the Trilateral Commission was formed, it's all been an asset grab. All the assets of the world have been moved into stronger hands along the way, taken away from people and also from nation states.
Of
These
course.
people have gobbled up everything in sight, and where it will end in the end, that's what Klaus Schwab was intimating when he said, "You will own nothing."
Avi.
Somebody has to own it all. Why not them, right? So whoever them is, the BlackRocks of the world and other, rich families, I suppose, or people like Elon Musk who ate the world. Who knows? But the point is, it won't be in our hands in the end. This is why I'm concerned about the fleecing of our national assets realized in land at this point. And this is a sitting duck for these people to come in, and they want to get their hands on it. They've said they want to get their hands on it, like Lutnick lusted over it. They're going to do it at some point. How they do it, I don't know about all that, the details of it, but you can see in the future, all of these resources are going to be accumulated to them in the end. And that's what SDGs are all about in the first place, sustainable development. It's managing the resources.
Yeah. And that's what the natural asset companies were all about, too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So we are coming up on 2 hours. So I just, out of respect for time, if there's anything else you want to do, or should we go to questions?
Let's do some questions.
All right. Well, let's hit the questions. So I think, are we going to put them up on the screen or? Yeah. Okay. Let me see if I can go through here. My battery's about to die on the computer, so hopefully we'll get them up on the screen. No, we don't have them on the screen.
Can I add one quick thing while you're getting those up? Okay, so I just did some searching here, and all of a sudden some dots got connected. So Japan, Masayoshi-san, right, of SoftBank, right, he proposed a sovereign wealth fund for Japan and the U.S., okay, in 2025, so this year. And here's what's interesting about this is that it says here, remember when President Trump said Japan gave us $550 billion, a blank check? Do you remember that out of Japan? Yeah. Well, that's to go into a U.S. sovereign wealth fund. So there you go. There's a blank check to fund the sovereign wealth fund, not even a company, right? So, we've been talking about, the lithium, we've been talking about the defense contractors, with Lutnick, but this was a blank check, and you have to ask yourself, what was that for? Why would someone write that? Well, probably driven by Masayoshi-san, private equity, SoftBank, being driven into a sovereign wealth fund and a joint venture sovereign wealth fund. And just like you were talking about with resources, Japan has none. What do they want? They want access to U.S. resources and land and so forth. So you can start to connect the dots. 550 blank check to basically feed the sovereign wealth fund.
Wow.
So there you go. There's that connection.
Yeah, Japan can buy our assets now instead of just buying our debt.
Exactly.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Wow.
All right. So I think we're okay. So the first question is from Effie. What do we think will happen to the people who completely opt out of the system? That's a great question. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'll chime in. I think that they're planning to capture everybody if they can. So I don't know exactly what they mean by opt out of the system, but I know there are a lot of people. There's a big movement to, exit, get off the grid, and I'm all for people being self-sufficient. I'm not, suggesting that people, if they can farm and live off the land and homeschool their own kids, all of that, whatever you can do to be resourceful, I absolutely encourage you to do so. But I think that they've got the Starlink, right? They've got ways of controlling people or making it so hard for them to survive, even if they're outside. So I think that they're of course rounding up the cities first, and the people who do opt in, right? Because those are the easiest to capture. But I don't think they're just going to say, "Oh, those people opted out, and we'll just leave them be." I think they have plans for them too.
If you read all of the United Nations documents relating to anything, New Urban Agenda, Agenda 21, 2030, all of that stuff, you'll see the phrase repeatedly, "no person left behind."
Yep.
It's all over their literature and repeated all the time within literature. That tells me there's no opt-out at that point. Everybody has to be opted in. This is in their mind. Doesn't mean that we can't be opted out somehow, but that's what they want to do, is to make sure everybody has to be in there. This is what inclusiveness is all about. Everybody has to participate.
That's right. And to your point, right, they have the 30 by 30 land grab agenda,
Yeah.
which is just a stepping stone to the half Earth, right? So they will increasingly make it so that they have ownership of more and more of the lands, which means they have controlling rights. So then you have no access. So even though you may technically think you own your land, you don't have any access to it. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a battle because they're moving for centralization, which is a species risk to do that kind of consolidation, which is why I'm saying that the battleground here, I guess, is over people being able to control and trade their own assets. This is why I think tokenization is the battleground. So I think if we get enough people to opt out, and to me, opting out isn't, I'm sewing my own clothes and I'm making my own food. I think that there's an actual optimistic version of this. But I will also say we don't have a lot of time because a lot of people are not aware of what's going on here, and they are moving at a very fast pace with zero friction, I would argue, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
sure. All right. So the next question is, have you seen the recent statement from the Russian government officials that accused the United States of planning to use cryptocurrencies to something and eliminate that it's a national debt? I don't know. Oh, to evaluate. I think that's what it is. Evaluate and eliminate the national debt. I can't quite make out what that word is, but yeah. I haven't seen that statement.
Well, I haven't seen them accuse us of that, but we are trying to do that. That's exactly what Cynthia Loomis stated. This is the actual, it's stated policy, right? If we buy a million of the million Bitcoin, we hold on to them for 20 years, we're going to magically wipe out our debt. This is this whole strategy behind this. It's absurd, but it is. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia said something about that, because that is what we're doing. And we're at the point where people are trying to be convinced, oh, well, if they're going to do this, now everybody's going in. I mean, this is like tulip mania all over again. And that only works if everybody buys into it. So it's going to be the individual that's going to be the exit liquidity in all of this.
Well, and I think I said this last time too. One of the big narratives that was circulating with the Q, I think PSYOP, I would call it, but no offense to people who are supporters, but one of the big things they were talking about was the debt jubilee, right? And how that's part of Jasara Nasara, is how all the debt is going to be forgiven. And I was very concerned that they were going to use that with this tokenization, that was going to be one of the ways that they market it to people, is that, oh, well, all of your debt's going to be forgiven, but now you don't actually own the asset. So you just get like a tokenized equivalent, which is essentially like, what you have up on the stock exchange. It's a bunch of numbers on a screen, but you don't actually own it.
I-
I'm not
I-
saying I would have to go with tokenization, but that's how I envision it going.
Well, again, this is why I say that there's nuance, but it can go away a great way. I'd say it's the least probable at this point. But this is the whole subject of my podcast tomorrow is what you're talking about.
Okay.
So many people are buying into Nisara, Jasara, the quantum financial system, med beds. Like there's this whole story that's been crafted and it's false. It's being completely engineered. There's no truth to it. There's no substance to it. And I'm gonna unpack all of it because I've been to conferences where I've introduced tokenization and people maybe haven't heard about what I was saying, but they came up to me like, "Oh, are you in XRP and XLM? And are you?" It's a lot of people.
Sure.
Whatever the marketing is behind this is phenomenal, but it's factually wrong. And I'm not going to be able to reach as many people as I'd like, but I'm going to try to reach as many people as I can to set the record straight. And I encourage people to go to YouTube and look at the videos about Nisara and Jasara and the people behind it. You can actually see the documentaries. You can see it yourself with your own eyes and experience it. It's not real.
No.
We might. I think we
have a-
covered. I
I'm
think we
sorry.
covered this on our last roundtable. America's AI action plan.
Yep.
And you have to remember that pillar 3, I'm going to get up here just so I can read it exact word for word. Pillar 3, in that there's only 3 pillars. Pillar
Yeah.
3, lead in international AI diplomacy and security. And then it says underneath that, export American AI to allies and partners.
Yep.
That tells, if Russia is going to be concerned about anything, it's that. We're
Yeah.
building empire at this point, using our AI to do it. So whatever we're talking about here, this is it. Whatever we talk about in America is going to be exported to the world because people, the other allies, if you will, they're going to have the same system that we have, whatever that is, and all the social implications. Doesn't matter, social impact, tokenization, etc. This is the same system. This will wipe out potentially the BRIC system at some point, and Russia has to be thinking at this point, if these people are going to come out to go to the whole world at this point to impress their AI on everybody, it's going to be game over. Now, how can they counter it? I don't know, honestly, but that's one way to look at it for sure.
Well, the UN is doing that too, right? They have their AI World Society, which is
Yes.
the same thing. So it's the Technate versus the AI World Society is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and with reference to Russia, I mean, we think about us having a lot of land and resources, but think about Russia. I mean, you're talking about a natural asset, rare earth metals. We probably can't even imagine how much is there. So again, we know, through Napoleon, they were trying to get there. Through Hitler, they were trying to get there. Through Hermitage Capital with Bill Browder, right? If you guys followed that story, they were trying to get into Russia too, through the back door. And I think that's what Europe has no choice right now with as much debt as they have. They have no choice but to try to get into Russia and try to take this stuff. Otherwise, they're going to fall the way of Nepal, probably, right? And people are going to, we already see the protest rising in France. So again, just another thing there on Russia and, and how do you break that barrier? This might be the way, potentially. I don't know. We'll have to see how that unfolds. But again, natural asset corporation, natural asset. I mean, I think Russia is ripe as any place in the world for natural assets.
Yeah. Mm.
All right, let's see. The next question we've got, my understanding is with the Genius Act is that it gives the big banks and corporations the ability to produce their own token crypto, token/crypto, and thus control over the monetary system. Can you please explain that? So
Yeah, it gives, well, any qualified entity, which they put a whole bunch of barriers there. So it is going to end up being, large financial institutions can create digital tokens that represent a dollar, but they have to be backed by U.S. treasuries. So this is a scheme that the administration has pushed to sell $2 trillion worth of treasuries because no one wants to buy our debt. But the the end result of this is what the stable coin is it's a programmable, trackable, censorable form of the dollar. Now, the one thing that I want to point out is our money is already largely trackable, censorable, and programmable. And that's something that people often don't think about. But this makes it even more controllable and more censorable. And so, so from that perspective, all this is doing is fueling more debt and adding more surveillance. So we're getting CBDC-like surveillance, giving control to Congress, giving control to the Federal Reserve, and we're using it to spend more money and add more debt.
And just to add to that, so we may already have some degree of that, but once the biodigital convergence goes into effect, the tokens are literally operating through people. So they can completely remote control interface. So I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. I'm not saying that's what the plan is, but if you read the documents on biodigital convergence, that is what they talk about. So, and tokenization gives them the ability to do that. And of course, control you fiscally as well. All right, let's see. Put up the next question. What do you think happens to those who don't want to be part of the system? So this is kind of a similar question.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that I think as Patrick said, the UN said nobody's left behind. We saw what that meant with the education system. So I don't think that they're just going to leave anybody or any assets on the table. I do think they have ways of capturing people. And I think, just the thing that comes to my mind, I'm sure they have many of other plans, but Starlink is, if you think about how many people have thought they were going off the grid because now they have Starlink, but Starlink also has like surveillance and drone capacities. So how off the grid are you really?
Really?
That's just one example. I'm just picking on Starlink, but it's, there's so many.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, but.
Yeah, we kind of answered it basically.
Yeah, okay.
I have to say though, it starts right here between your ears.
Yes.
And
cognitive sovereignty. Yes.
Exactly. This is the last space that they want to get after, and they're doing a good job with AI at this point. So, you have to take ownership of your own brain and your own thoughts and your own sovereignty, personal sovereignty.
That's right.
If you have a good handle on that, nobody can whip you in that sense.
I agree. And that's part of why they've, the whole Skinnerian, Wundtian education system was designed to strip us of just that.
Yes, exactly.
Wouldn't a sovereign wealth fund be better advised/managed by a business person than politician? So I think this is where they're, trying to convince us that we better run by a CEO monarch. No, because it's privatized, and my opinion is that it's privatized, and then it becomes it's not transparent, right? So I don't think it would be better to have it be in, run by
Look, already Larry Fink is in line to run our sovereign wealth fund. So what's the problem? Yeah, let him do it. He'd do a great job for us. I'm being facetious, of course.
Yes. Well, I think I brought this up last time, but he already manages the Treasury, right? They did that back in 2018, and nobody talks about this. But I was horrified by it. To me, this was just such a blatantly unconstitutional, conflict of interest. They're just, it's pretty unconscionable to me, but.
Well, I think people should be managing their own assets. I don't, I think the issue here is whether it should be a politician or whether it should be a singular business person.
Yes.
Defeats the point. We shouldn't have these layers of people making these decisions. And I can't remember, it was one of these books, Predictably Irrational or Nudge, or one of these, where it was trying to make the argument. I think they were talking about Norway and the sovereign wealth fund and how it outperforms how individual investors perform. Well, that's not the point. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. this year or that. But the point is, you should have we have free will, and we should be able to express our free will, even if it doesn't generate the same amount of returns. Part of the reason that these returns are actually generated the way that they are is because they regulate and control the whole system. So if you're the only one that can invest and you're directing all of the money, well, don't be surprised when you're going to get a better return than people that have to play. People have to play by your rules, and you get kind of an advanced warning because you've crafted them. So
Yes,
anyway, that's my view on that.
absolutely.
Well, and we can look to something like GameStop. Even though I wouldn't say the greatest analysis and everything went behind it, when people get together and they have a good idea and they stick together, I mean, you see what can happen, right? And so that's the key: is you got to take back some of your money from BlackRock's, Vanguard, State Streets, these. When they start putting your money in these private equity funds, try to resist that, because why are they giving that to you? Why are they opening the door for you? It's not out of the kindness of their heart, I don't believe. So the key is, if people can stick together, and really look, everyone has great ideas. That's the bottom line. We're all given gifts, and so if we put those together and we assemble those gifts and we figure out how to make it work, instead of getting, just brainwashed that, what Wall Street's the only way. They're the only ones that know how this works. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Like, they've sold us this bill of goods, right? And they put a layer between us and the analysts and tell us they're so smart, right? These guys we just need to be realistic here and pull together. If we, the people, pull together, we can beat it. The problem is somehow we don't. It goes back to what's that little cartoon, A Bug's Life, and they're like, when the guy says, there's 1,000 of them and there's only one of us, the ants, right? If they figure that out, we're done, and so I love that one. You can't.
This was the movie Ants. I love that scene. Yeah, exactly. That's totally right.
You can't say it any better than that. It's a great little cartoon. It's perfect.
Absolutely. And this also goes back to that point with, like you brought up, DTCD. They're essentially like they're middlemen, right? So they're able to be really if you think about it in like a metaphor kind of term, they're the dialectic. They're the ones who can decide, which way the pendulum's swinging, and they block everything. And of course, it always ends up in the same place because all paths lead, just churns, even though you think you have the option. But the less middlemen we have, the better. We want the people to take ownership of that. And if they choose to put it into a pool, that's of their own volition, right? You have that option. But I think part of the reason we've gotten to where we've gotten is because we've abdicated so much responsibility. I bring this up all the time with people when they talk about how, America's done and how it's so corrupt. Well, the experiment was self-governance, which means that it's incumbent upon us to self-govern. We've outsourced everything, and we've outsourced it to very corrupt people who, even if they weren't that corrupt to begin with, they got some power, and now they're, we know how that saying goes. So, all right. So what do we have next? If we under the biodigital convergence, how can we be off the grid? It seems we would need a complete different system that locked them out. I think they meant if we were under the biodigital convergence. So yeah, this is very concerning because they have smart dust they can sprinkle on people. They've already shown they don't need, this is the cryptocurrency using body activity data, right? This was the 666 patent that Microsoft has that everybody's talking about back in 2020. It was 2018 and then 2019 when it was implemented. But yeah, and this patent, I encourage people read that short little abstract. I actually did a show where I couldn't get through all of it. It's very, very long. And they go through all sorts of, implications of that patent. So if people are curious about it, I encourage them to go and look that up and actually read through all those links. But yeah, they have all sorts of technologies. I mean, Smart Just is just one. It's been around for a very, very long time. It's not new. So yeah, they have ways of, once that goes into effect, of being able to control people, unfortunately. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but no. Okay. So just joining the live stream, how has alt media served as a conduit for said techno-feudalism? i.e. Rockfin on blockchain agents, opportunists, etc. Well, I mean, I've talked about, on my show, I've talked about Rockfin. I do think they were some sort of an op, it does seem like. I know they have kicked a lot of people off and not given them the money. They've held on to it. So, I mean, at the very least, that seems like an ethical concern. But I don't know if other people want to chime in on that. Any thoughts?
I understand it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think in general, alt media, which we talked about the other day, has been it's no different than the original system of having three networks. We still have censorship. In fact, right now at this point, I think 70% of the traffic are bots, and there are a lot more images now where you see these bot farms where it's 10,000 cell phones in a room being managed by a handful of people. So most of the traffic is fake. The algorithms are generated from the top down and controlled from the top down, designed to manipulate our limbic systems, to generate fear, to generate rage bait. And even the platforms that are supposed to be these pro-freedom platforms, they're owned by politicians. They're owned by Truth Social, Trump, Rumble, JD Vance, and Peter Thiel, and Vivek. And so it's all either pay to play or fake traffic or rigged algorithmically. So it's an illusion of free speech.
Yeah, so I wrote an article called The Algorithmic Oracle. It is essentially a book. It's very, very long. But this talks about the mechanism of how that happens and how people, how they manufacture consensus through these cybernetic feedback loops. The other thing I'll add to this is, from Cold War Forecasting, Modern Mind Control, Exposing the Global Infrastructure of Manufactured Consensus. And it's predicated on the Delphi method and sensitivity training. But now it's done through cybernetic algorithmic feedback loops. But I was also going to say that I call it the indie media, and this is a holdover from my film days where, you had these very independent, these are like student films or people who are, in their garage or their basement, as the cliche goes, and they would scramble together maybe some equipment from their school where they went, or from their uncle who worked in the industry or whatever. And that's truly independent. And then, of course, you had the big studios who are multi-million dollar. I mean, studio films are like $200 million projects sometimes. They're huge, huge budgets. They're not independent at all. And then you have what I call indie, which is like an indie SAG film could be $5 million. It could be $20 million. I don't know about you, but I don't know any truly independent person who just has a passion project and has $20 million in their back pocket to, put into their vanity project. So typically what happens is they become a vehicle for propaganda. Somebody who has an agenda will fund it and say, okay, but you have to check these boxes, and the messaging is going to be in accordance with whatever it is they're trying to promulgate. And I see that happening through what we call the indie media now. And there are funding traces of this. And sometimes it's political, sometimes it's foreign entities. We have lots of evidence of foreign entities who are trying to create chaos and destabilization and demoralization in various countries, whether it be the United States or elsewhere. But there are also, of course, domestic agents as well who are trying to create chaos and promulgate narratives for various agendas. So unfortunately they're a lot of times not nearly as independent as you might think. So
and when you figure out how it works, and even if you want to try to fight it, it gets very expensive. And I was just talking to someone the other day, and there are times you think you want to fight something and you find out it's going to cost $5 or $6 million, and you're like, I don't know. Right, Aaron?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They control the system, and the cost of fighting through legal channels is prohibitive.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've got it super
fight in different ways.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's very cost prohibitive, and it's also very time consuming. I mean, you have to go through so many channels. I know people who've done class action lawsuits against YouTube. I don't want to discourage people. If you have the time, you have the money and the resources, people should pool together, and they should. I do think legal action can be very effective, but most of the little guys who are being censored, or who are, are the they're the flunkies for this. Typically, they don't have the means, and that's typically why they go after the small guy, because they're not going to have recourse. But if you do have the means, I encourage you to do so, absolutely, and pull together with other people who do. It can be very, very effective. So we have a super chat from Harry Ludwig. Thank you so much. And I think we had one other one. Yeah, super sticker. This is from Wekia. Character saying you rock, and while showing their pumped biceps. All right. Yeah, all the nights. So, and thank you, Harry. Yeah, for the super chat. So, yeah, I think that's all the questions. Unless anybody has anything they want to add, or any maybe positive things they want to end on, we'll close out, and definitely we'll go around and everybody tell everybody where they can find individually, because all of you are doing incredible work, on this topic individually too. So
Yeah, I want to say,
Yeah.
repeat what you said at the beginning of the show. We need to cover the medical field next time,
yes,
because technocrats have totally taken over the medical healthcare industry. Totally.
yes,
This is going to be a program that everybody and their mother, especially what and grandmother and aunt, all these other people, you want to get everybody involved with that one especially. Is going to be a blockbuster.
yes, absolutely. And yeah, we're seeing that. I personally think that the whole Maha movement was a Trojan horse for this AI precision medicine, which is where we're going. Yeah, we have lots of blueprints like China, who are way further ahead of us. That's not where we want to head, I don't think. But yeah, so the next show is we've agreed October 22nd. So we'll be back with our shining knights, and yeah, let's. So if nobody else has anything you want to add, then yeah, let's tell everybody where they can find you. I guess we'll start with Craig. Where can we find you? And anything else?
Yeah, on X at Real World HD, and then on Rumble, a show called World of Harmonic Deconstruction. That's how you can find it, or World HD. And then I think it's streaming on YouTube now. It'll probably be streaming other places here in the near future. But that's what we do, is just cover the markets every day, try to get people to think about ways to take back some of these assets like we talked about tonight, and make some of your own decisions. Find better ways to do it than just get caught in the funnel that they want you to go in, right? There are a lot of options out there. People just think bonds and stocks, or owning a home. There's a lot of other things out there that the financial community has built mostly for them. That's why they don't teach you. That's why you got to find ways to figure that out and find other options, so. That's thanks for everyone. Great stuff tonight. Thank you. Thank all of you. I appreciate it. Appreciate all the work you're doing too.
Thank you. All right, Aaron, where can we find you?
Great. You can find me at daylightfreedom.org, and you can find me on X at Aaron R. Day. I'm focusing my efforts on trying to raise awareness about technocracy, help people reclaim their free will, and build alternative systems that are private using tokenization. And so you can check me out there. And also I have a podcast on Monday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So thank you again for this. I love these panels, and I hope we continue to do more.
Awesome. Well, we will October 20th, and we'll be back. So, and Patrick?
Indeed. Technocracy.news is my website. Everything you can find there, like this brochure that I just completed. It's about technocracy. And interesting, we had a robot on the cover of this brochure. It just so happened. And the tagline at the bottom here is, "You wanted convenience, instead you got replaced." So in any case, this is a handout. We're selling this for 25 bucks per 25. And we're hoping that people will hand this out to people when they meet them on the street, at a restaurant, doctor's office, whatever. Get people engaged somehow. Nobody understands technocracy. it's amazing how many people have been buried with their head in the sand all these years. So this is one way for people to get the word out. Otherwise, I want to just encourage everybody to be proactive. Don't sit on this information. Take it to people you know. There must be something that you caught here. Maybe it's not robots. Maybe it's something to do with your finances, whatever. Take something, some idea, and discuss it with somebody else right now.
That's right. And then also we are doing October 4th. Do you want to mention that, the Omni-War?
Indeed, we have an international symposium it's on my website, the advertisement and the form to get alerted for late breaking details. We have people coming from UK, Netherlands, Japan, United States. That's me, and we're gonna have a really great time giving. We call them coordinated messages because we've been meeting actually for 2 months already, weekly to discuss our presentation. So it's going to be tightly integrated as one message, the digital attack on humanity.
That's right. Yeah, I can't wait. I think it's going to be really, really, really powerful. So yeah, the one thing I will just add before is when you're talking about, Patrick had mentioned the thing between your ears. This is the thing that I drive home all the time. I feel like I'm a broken record. I keep talking about this, and I keep going back to the Declaration of Independence as a way to explain this. But really, people need to understand what it means to be human, that we do have free will and where that comes from. And I think that our founding fathers here in the United States saw that as a bulwark against tyranny, but I think that it is the same bulwark against technocracy. We need to understand that we are more than a contract. We are more than, an opt-in agreement. We are more than whatever technology we use or interface with. No matter how hard they try, they cannot replace what we have. They can try and convince us that these AI will become sentient, and the ramifications of just convincing people alone are incredibly tremendous, very powerful, and I think potentially very pernicious. So we need to remember what it means to be human and where we get our free will from, and that means that it's incumbent upon us to exercise that free will and that we have inalienable rights. That does not mean rights in a click-wrap agreement. That does not mean rights granted by the government. It means they are inalienable. I believe granted by our Creator, who is also who endowed us with free will. So you can find me at CourtenayTurner.com. I'm the host of the Courtenay Turner Podcast, and I spell my name like Courtenay, and that's Courtenay. I always spell it out for people just because you can't find me any other way. If you misspell it, unfortunately, you won't find me. And you can also check out my Substack, where that's CourtenayTurner.substack.com. So thank you so much to the Knights. Thank you all for joining us live and watching and bringing all of your great questions. And be sure to join us again next time, October 22nd. 6 p.m. Eastern.
God bless.
God bless. Awesome.